Good morning and welcome to the Point. This week we're featuring one very big Republican primary. There are seven Republicans trying to replace Peter McGregor in the 73rd House District. So we've had to abbreviate these interviews. Enough of me talking. Here are the candidates. This is a crowded field. Anytime you have a sitting member who's vacating a seat, you get a lot of folks in primaries, particularly out in that district. Why'd you decide to run now?
This has been a passion of mine since I was in middle school when I helped in my first campaign when I was 14 years old. And I said, I have to do this at some point in my career. And about 15 years ago, Rick, I talked to a couple of U.S. senators and I said, all right, I'm ready. I want to get involved with politics. Should I start at school board, city council, township? And they were both like, heavens no, don't you dare get involved with the local politics. You'll just create enemies there. They said the lowest rung on your ladder should be the state representative seat. And I thought, wow, that's a big first rung on a ladder. And at the time, Rick, I had 3 small children, 1 on the way. The timing just wasn't right. Well, now, these small children, I have 2 in college, 2 in high school. I've got the energy, passion, resources to do it. And as you said, it's an open seat with Representative McGregor leaving. It's the perfect opportunity to jump in and fulfill this passion and dream to try and help Michigan turn around a little bit.
Well, it's a passion, but what needs to be done that you don't see being done in Lanesboro?
Right, I'm glad you asked that, Rick, because primarily the number one issue that I think we have here in Michigan is jobs. We need to get people back to work. Right now, I was talking to the Small Business Association of Michigan, and we're about 45 out of 50 states in terms of entrepreneurial and new business growth. That means there's 44 other states to go to before we even look at Michigan. And as a small business owner coming from a small business family, that's got to change. And when you have things like right to work that was passed a couple years ago and getting rid of the small business tax, those things all help, but we still need to do a better job of easing the regulations and tax burdens for small businesses. It's not going to be big business and it's not going to be big government that turns this around. It's going to be the small entrepreneur. It's going to be these small businesses. That's going to be the fizz in the soda pop that kind of gets Michigan back on the map. We should be a top 10 state.
You mentioned that taxes have been restructured under this administration and that there have been some changes in terms of regulation. Are there specifics when it comes to regulations that you want to change? And I ask because of this. Those regulations that are in place were likely put in place stemming from some action or inaction on the part of a business. So when you start changing those or relaxing those regulations, do you have any specifics in mind? And if so, what assurances can you give people that there won't be abuses if those regulations are
right? Let me give you one example. In this state, you need 1,800 hours of training to become a licensed barber, to cut hair. That's a little ridiculous in my opinion. And you only need 1,200 hours to be a licensed attorney. So you need 600 more hours to be a barber than you do to be an attorney. Now, granted, attorneys need to go to law school and there's additional schoolwork that gets involved, but that's just a simple example of something that I think the common citizen in Michigan would say, that needs to change. There's something going on there. And you look at our insurance costs for automobiles, one of the highest in the country. And it just makes it very prohibitive to do business here in the state. And then also when you look at the unemployment taxes that small businesses have to pay, they're very restrictive in terms of small businesses getting started and thriving in the state.
Are we starting at the same place? Why this office? Why now?
Well, I've been in public service for, my entire life. And what we have now is we have a lot of politicians in office, but we don't have a lot of public servants. And sometimes politicians tend to serve themselves, where public servants serve others. I started serving when I was 18. I joined the Army. I served under Commander-in-Chief Ronald Reagan. And I continued that public service afterwards. I've been serving 5 years at the Grand Rapids Home for Vets. I volunteer one-on-one with the veterans twice a week for 5 years. I've also been teaching children's ministries for 13 years. As far as political public service, I don't like to call it political. I'm more of a public servant, but I've been elected as a precinct delegate, delegate chair, caucus chair. I've worked at the grassroots level for over 5 years, working with my community and also with the Republican Party as well.
When you talk about, and you make a distinction between public service and politicians, but no doubt the distinction carries on into things that you would like to accomplish. So as you look at this office, big primary field that you're in, but if you're successful in the primary, if you were successful in November, what are the issues that you want to talk about?
Well, I want a part-time legislature. 46 states are part-time. Only 4 of us are full-time. We're a dinosaur. Full-time legislature is very wasteful. There's no sense of urgency with the full-time legislature. There's a lot of just sitting around and let's pass another regulation, let's pass another law. No, let's not pass another regulation or another law. Part-time legislature would create a sense of urgency, and that would cause people to work together more, and people would cross party lines more. You wouldn't worry about Democrat, Republican, or Independent, because it's supposed to be people first. It's not supposed to be party first. And unfortunately, that's the point where we're at. And with a part-time legislature, it does create this sense of urgency. You'll get more done, and also you're going to save a lot of money with a part-time legislature. And the thing that I like the best is the people working there. If I'm blessed enough to get in, if I'm working there, you're going to lower the salary of all the people working there because it's part-time. So the people that are there to serve themselves, the people that are there for a job, because it's not a job, it's service. And the people that are there for the money, they'll tend to leave. But the people that have served all their lives, that have given their lives to service, will stay, and we'll get a lot more done. So that's why I want a part-time legislature.
It's interesting you bring that up because I have heard a lot of people talk about a part-time legislature, and I always, in my mind, try to understand how that's going to work. Let's pretend for a moment you have a part-time legislature, and let's say that you're going to meet for X amount of days a year, and you're going to cut the salaries by, what, 2/3 or whatever you're going to cut it by?
Let's not get crazy.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, here's the fact of the matter is.
Cut the salary in half at least.
All right, so you're going to be making somewhere in the neighborhood of $35,000.
$40,000 should be.
Which, for most folks, would probably indicate that they would have to have a second job, right?
I don't know. I've made $35,000 or $40,000 a year, and I guess it's just, it's not what you make, it's what you save. And
so what makes you run for this office in this election cycle?
Good question. It was 5 years ago this month. I was pistol whipped, robbed, carjacked, marched in the woods at gunpoint with a gun in the back of my head, forced down on my knees, and told I was going to be killed. This assault was a result of a gang initiation of a 13-year-old boy. It sounds horrible, but in all seriousness, it was probably an act of providence or serendipity. Over the past 3 years, I've been able to mentor the juvenile assailant who was 13 years old at the time. And my first meeting with him outside of the court system, I asked him, "Why'd you do this to me?" And he said it was a result because he felt like he had to do it. And what that really communicated to me was there's people in our own city who don't have enough opportunity that they're forced into crime. So for me, that changed my life. My campaign now is because I seek to give everyone an equal opportunity to achieve what they want to achieve. And I believe the best way to do that is through Republican standpoint and economic principles.
So how do you do that? I mean, if you talk about a problem, and that's a horrifying story, mm-hmm. But if you talk about a problem that we have been talking about for decades,
yep.
That has been prevalent, particularly in larger cities, but as we know, it can be in small towns, rural areas. Mm-hmm. How do you approach it? How do you attack that problem?
Well, for me, I think it's a three-part approach to achieve it. First, one of the main reasons why individuals go into crime, first is a lack of opportunity, and second of all, it's a lack of mentors and people who feed into their lives, like parents. So we need to promote a better education system, one that accommodates multiple learning styles. So a lot of these kids, and especially in the inner city, Grand Rapids and other cities, it's truancy. It's a lack of a system that supports them. So first is education. Second of all, it's my goal to make Michigan, in any way I can, an entrepreneur's paradise. We need to adopt more principles, and Michigan's on the right path. We need to adopt more principles and mechanisms to support new businesses and small business growth.
Let's go back and talk about education for a minute. You talk about teaching on multiple levels, multiple disciplines perhaps, mm-hmm. Because we now know, and we have known for some time, that different individuals learn in different ways, different children learn in different ways. Mm-hmm. However, public schools have long been saddled with the problem of having all of these children funnel into a central location with classrooms that many believe are overcrowded and have kind of a one-fits-all kind of mentality because that's all that they're left to do. So mm-hmm. if you're talking about having these perhaps different stages or tiers of teaching, that immediately as an observer sounds like it's going to cost money. How are you going to pay for that?
I believe we can do it without costing any additional dollars. I think we need to free up our teachers to actually teach instead of lecture. If we replace the class time, which a vast majority of it's spent on lecturing students in a one-size-fits-all approach, if we, say, take a YouTube-type video, post it online, allow students to learn a concept as a night's homework beforehand, and allow them to learn at their own pace. If they don't understand an issue, they can pause and rewind. And when they come into class, then it frees up the teacher to actually interact, and it provides a human element. Instead of a teacher talking to students, they now have interaction.
I always start with the same question. There has to be a point where you decide to run. So why did you decide to run for this office at this time?
I've wanted to run for this office for a long time. Actually, I helped a previous 73rd State Rep, Tom Pierce, during his election run. I followed Pete McGregor with great envy. I was actually going to run against Pete 4 years ago and chose not to. I've also been pushing Pete to run for the Senate seat so that I could. But my biggest reason I'm running is I owe the 73rd District an awful lot. I've been a businessman, an automobile dealer in the 73rd District for, I've been in the auto business for 36 years. And I owe this community an awful lot. They didn't run me out of town, they supported me, and they've made me and my family what we are today.
What is it that needs to be done in Lansing? What is it that beyond what you've just described clearly, but what are the issues that motivate you to run?
I have a number of issues. The first one I'm greatly disappointed in is nothing's being done, is we have to do something with roads and infrastructure. It was probably the most important item for this year, and it hasn't gotten done. And it'll probably be carried over to January of 2015, and I'd like to have some input on it. The other reason, I have 7 grandchildren. Education is very big, very important to me. I want to make sure that their education, their opportunities are the same that I had growing up. Part of that's going to be in funding. Part of that's going to be in as we come to terms with teacher evaluation and core curriculum. And finally, I'm a business guy. I'm not a politician, and I need to look for the opportunities to help business growth, which in turn will make job growth, which will benefit all of Michigan.
You mentioned First Roads and your disappointment with the legislature for not getting something done, and you aren't alone there. A lot of people are disappointed that there wasn't some comprehensive package that was agreed to before they adjourned for the summer. But the problem is that it's hard to find 19 votes over in the Senate to raise taxes by $1 billion if that's what needs to be done. Is that what needs to be done?
I'm not a raise the tax proponent. We do have a surplus. I'm sure there, not being a member of the legislature yet, I'm sure there are items and fees and without raising taxes. There's been a lot of proposals out there. Nobody's willing to vote for them right now. The disappointment is that we have some money in surplus. We have some fees and other registration ideas that we can look at. We have some sales tax money that could probably be allocated that way. We should have done something for roads. There's a whole bunch of different ideas. There's a $500 million, from the Speaker of the House, his proposal. There's $1 billion to $1.2 billion, depending on the governor and the Senate Majority Leader. This was the most important problem of 2014, and it has to be fixed.
And there are more candidates in the 73rd House District. They'll be up next. To the Point. Welcome back to The Point. 7 Republicans are vying for the Republican nomination in the 73rd House District. You've met some of the candidates. Now, here are the rest. What makes you decide to run for this race this cycle?
I wasn't going to run this cycle. The reason why I decided to run this cycle is there's a lot of problems in Lansing. I met with the other candidates running, and most of them don't like to get into specific issues. I absolutely love getting into specifics. The main committees that I want to be on is a Veterans Committee, because I had a lot of soldiers experiencing veterans issues last year, so the scandal hitting it and that being one of the things I was running on has drastically helped. And then the other I want to be on is a Regulatory Committee, and so we can reduce the regulations so businesses can start to grow.
What is it that you want to do from a regulatory standpoint? We'll get back to the veterans in a minute, but from a regulatory standpoint, what do you want to change, and how do you think that will impact business?
We'll do what I want to do is something like what North Carolina's done. North Carolina has a office where you walk in there to start a business, or you walk in for an EPA regulation at the county level. The county completely administers EPA standards. The state still has their standards and has their laws, but the county operates it. So we get rid of the state EPA, so you simplify the forms and the process, reducing massive amounts of costs on businesses. And then that way they walk in, they can get their license in the same place, they can get all their permits in the same place, the inspections can go in the same place. That's just one example of it. Another example is folks who do rental properties. They have to sit there and they have 3 or 4 inspections they have to go through, instead of just having 1 or 2 people that can do an inspection and the inspection is fair across the board. We need to simplify the forms and the regulatory process, reduce it to the county, and just make it so it's easier for businesses to grow at the local level.
You mentioned veterans and veterans' concerns. Obviously, a lot of what we have heard in the past several weeks has been a federal issue, and the federal government has been looking at that. But on the state level, we've heard a fair amount about our veterans home in Grand Rapids, and also veteran services, though administered at the federal level from Battle Creek and elsewhere. What would you like to see done for veteran services?
The state of Michigan has its own Veterans Affairs. What I'd like to do is what Pete McGregor and Robert Hewlin are kind of proposing. They're proposing doing a regionalized veterans homes and having the counties kind of bid into the millages to operate those homes. And then that way it gets these veterans closer to their families so that their families can help them redevelop with their mental health. At the state level, I'd like to see it where our veterans home is much better taken care of. I'd like to see it where our care is, maybe we are the first state to pilot like a voucher system, because we do care for our veterans in the GR hospital, and they also go through the Veterans Administration and the Veterans Building next door, but 3 to 4 hour wait for anybody is unreasonable. So if we set up like a state level voucher system for the veterans in our state, so that way if they're sitting there longer than 45 minutes, the state of Michigan can give them a voucher just like Medicaid and Medicare, and they can go to the hospital and get the treatment they need. And then instead of them waiting in line for 3 to 4 hours, if they have the time to deal with the voucher, go there and to get taken care of in less than 45 minutes and get a much better treatment than they currently have. We could be the state that actually provides solutions to a massive problem.
It's a big field in an open seat. Why did you decide to run for this office, and why now?
Well, you know, Rick, I have a passion for public service. It's part of my family history. It's been taught to us through many years. And since a young age, I really was interested in government and in public policy. And I think that I have a unique set of experiences to offer the residents of the 73rd District. I'm a certified public accountant. I was an auditor of some government agencies and cities. I was in executive financial management for 24 years in private industry, 13 years as a chief financial officer. And I'm also a co-owner of our family small business, Afternoons, Cleaners, and Tuxedos, and that's been in business since 1947. And one of the other differences is I am a local elected official. I serve on the Grand Rapids Township Board. I've been on the Township Board since 2004 and as treasurer since 2007. So I think that I really want to take that experience and put it to work in Lansing and for the residents of the 73rd District and the state of Michigan.
Well, it sounds like you know a lot about sharpening pencils when it comes down to budgets. You've done a lot of numbers over the years. So how does that experience translate to Lansing, where we have seen a continued problem? Though budgets have gotten done much more quickly, there is still a lot of unhappiness among some folks about how and where money is being spent.
I think one of the interesting things that I'm asked in a lot of surveys and by voters is, do we spend too much money, do we spend too little money, or do we spend enough money? And I would say you could almost say the answer is yes to all three of those. In some areas we probably spend the right amount, in some areas we probably spend too much, and in some areas too little. And I think we all know what those would be. A lot of people have been talking about roads and education and those things, and then people say, well, corrections might be too high. So I think as a CPA and as an accountant, you can go down there and maybe start asking some questions and peeling back the onion a little bit and say, what are these structural costs that we've got? Are there areas where we can cut? I think being from the private sector, I think if someone tells you, well, you know, we really can't cut anymore, you're always a little bit suspicious of that and say, well, have we looked at things in the right way? And so I think that as a CPA, I think it gives you a little bit of perspective to say, maybe ask the questions a little differently and see what opportunities there might be.
Let's talk for a minute about one of the areas that you say might be underfunded, and that's roads. We've seen the proposals. We see that there aren't 19 votes in the Senate to do any of them, at least not before they broke for the summertime. Have you given it some thought? Do you have a personal thought about the ways to get to road repair? Because I start from the assumption that you believe, like most of us, that Michigan roads are not in the best shape right now.
I think as I go door to door and talk to the residents of the district, clearly they're frustrated. Some will say flat out, well, go ahead and raise my taxes. And others will say, well, wait, can we find a different way, as I was discussing earlier. And so I think, really when you look at this as a long term, gasoline usage is going to continue to go down. So we can raise gas taxes, but will that really solve anything in the long range? And I think that's really crucial, is that we work through a long range solution for the roads.
What made you decide to run for this office, and why now?
Well, we had an open seat in the 73rd District, and Mr. McGregor was not running. And I didn't see any of the other candidates actually addressing some of the issues I think are most important.
What are those issues?
In particular, what's happening to our children and our families in the Title IV funding, Social Security Title IV funding, which I think is wreaking havoc on our economy, on our families, and our children.
Explain for viewers what Title IV is and what is your concern about it.
Well, Title IV, it's called Social Security Title IV, and it's the umbrella funding mechanism that funds a lot of things like the family court, the friend of the court, child protective services, the adoptions, the foster care programs. And these things, when they were started out, they had good intentions, but it's grown to be really a monster. And it's wreaking havoc with our children, taking too many children away from their parents, and causing a lot of problems.
That is an issue that does impact a lot of people, but there are many other issues facing the state. What else is of interest to you?
Well, yeah, obviously there's a lot of different issues. In particular, we could do much better in so many areas here in the state. If we just followed the rules and protections we have in the U.S. Constitution and the Michigan Constitution, but it's things like the veterans, for example. We're doing such a poor job with our veterans. My brother is a disabled veteran from the Vietnam War. We're treating them so poorly. Other states are doing a much better job, and we're hurting ourselves. We're shooting ourselves in the foot, because we can do things like many of our veterans are on the streets here, and if they filled out the correct paperwork, they could be receiving their proper benefits from the federal government. All we'd have to do is make sure to give them some assistance and make sure they fill out the paperwork correctly. Other states like Florida do this, and their veterans can be good citizens in the community and bring in income.
One of the things that didn't happen in the legislature in this past session was some kind of a definitive fix for roads in the state. And I know that up in your district you have a mix of interstate highways, rural roads, some city roads, and a lot of them have got some pretty good potholes. What should we be doing when it comes to roads in the state of Michigan?
I think, I'm really kind of shocked people are making such a big deal out of that. Roads are important, obviously, but I think they're a distraction, because it's like the analogy of in your own house. If your driveway might have some potholes in it or something, you want to cover it up, but you've got people dying inside of cancer or something. There's much more important issues we have to deal with besides the potholes in the road. We should be spending a little bit of time on that, but our other issues are much more serious.
If there were a plan to raise revenues to fix those roads, would you be in favor or opposed to that?
I'd be opposed to that. I think we can make adjustments, many more adjustments in other areas to cover the if we actually do need to raise money for the roads.
We're back with more To the Point in just a moment. This morning we took a look at one very crowded primary race in the 73rd District, and there are many other primary matchups that you'll need to decide coming up in August. That's before we can move on to that big event in November. We'll try to feature as many of them as we can right here every Sunday morning when you join us at 10 o'clock on Wood TV 8 for To the Point.